Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we're going to do that one scene from Pan's Labyrinth.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media. Pulcher,
that's what I've heard.
That is what we've heard. So let's talk about this one scene. What is this one scene this time around?
We are doing the Pale Man scene.
Yes.
Pretty short scene. What, about 5 minutes maybe?
Yeah, even if that. Yeah, it's quick, but I feel like there's a build up before it.
It definitely is. It's impactful, and maybe you can give us a little bit of some of the context of the scene inside of the movie. Obviously, Ophelia is the main girl character here, but she's essentially trying to escape this new reality that she's in this war-torn Spain. I think it's in the 40s, 1944, I think it is. Her mother just married this awful, sadistic army officer who essentially constantly demeans her, thinks basically girls are useless, except for vessels for more boys to join his army. So she discovers new ways to, I guess, another world and meets new creatures and just trying to it's escapism is what it is. And that's really what that's what fantasy is anyways. But I remember seeing this movie in the theater going, I've never seen anything like The Pale Man before.
No. Well, and I think as a movie, you've maybe seen similar things to the escapism that happens in Pan's Labyrinth. Like, one of the things I think that Guillermo del Toro is always been so good at, and I remember feeling this way, like, Kronos is amazing, not taking anything away from that, but it had more of a traditional horror tropism to it, whereas I'm thinking of Devil's Backbone. Devil's Backbone utilized escapism of a ghost story with children on the backdrop of again, using the same backdrop, because Pan's Labyrinth is supposed to be not even an unofficial sequel. It's supposed to be a sequel to The Devil's Backbone. The young men that we see who are the freedom fighters, the rebels who are hiding and living in the woods in Pan's Labyrinth, are supposed to be, according to Del Toro, the boys. They are the grown-up boys from the orphanage from Devil's Backbone.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I've never heard that.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting to be like, okay, this exists within that same world, even within that same time frame. Just a handful of years later, of Spain dealing with this oncoming fascist regime, right? And you think about other fantastical escapisms. I'm thinking of something like Jojo Rabbit, that utilizes very similar ideas of, like, how does a kid deal with the world is full of monsters, real ones. So how can I navigate and create fake ones, right?
I never would have thought to compare it to Jojo Rabbit, but you're totally right.
Like a kid can't quantify what real fascism looks like, but an ogre like the Pale Man, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, not to put too fine a point on it, when Ophelia comes in and there is this big long table with all of this massive feast on it, but in the corner is a pile of children's shoes. Am I the only one that thought about the Holocaust? Because boy, that pile of children's shoes, now that is a classic cliche from fairy tales of, oh, these are all the shoes that this beast has eaten. So Del Toro talks about this as the Pale Man being the perfect sort of proxy for what a fascist regime is like, because it's always hungry, it's ruthless, it only wakes up when it feels like that its authority is being threatened. and then it has an endlessly insatiable mouth, but no nutrients go to the rest of its body, which is why its legs are still these spindly little spines. Like its legs are not.
You got the hanging arm skin.
Yep,
And
that all of that is to create this object that really is fascism as a beast. And so
For sure.
it's interesting that he melds perfectly, the fantasy that we should see in, I don't know, something like Jim Henson's Labyrinth with this very real world
different Labyrinth. Yeah.
this very real world visceral aspect of this beast, right?
For sure. I think, and I read a very similar thing in my research as well. Just Del Toro conceived the Pale Man as an allusion to the perverted image of stigmata, right?
Completely.
The ghastly wounds are supposed to signify grace and piety, right? Yep. But at the same time, eating the grapes is her way of proving kind of her strength through the movie of that courageous disobedience, right? Where it's a reflection of the backdrop of this war, disobeying a fascist regime, basically, kind of what you're hitting on there.
Well, and also think about this idea that the eye, I mean, definitely the stigmata thing, where it's like the whole. Sorry for the pun. The whole is holy, but if you put the creature's eye inside of it, what it means now is what it's grasping at is all it can see, right? So you do think about the greed of these rulers coming into a country and saying, we want that, we want this, we want that, we want this. Without the ability to grasp it, it's blind, right? So the eye has to be within the hand.
It's fascinating.
Now it's worth mentioning for a moment here that, I mean, what year is Pan's Labyrinth?
Came out in 2006.
Dude, we are in 2006. We are at the height of jittery MTV music video style Japanese ghosts or Korean ghosts or whatever you want to say, right? Like that is what we are inundated with in horror in America at this period of time.
Good point.
And Del Toro is, he's one of these guys. I don't know if you've seen I can't think of the name of it. I have it out on order on Amazon right now just because we were talking about this. And I was like, why do I not own this? But the book, the diary that he made about the monsters he's created in his...
Oh, yeah, and all the old art sketches and
just
stuff.
Like every time that he would have an idea that scared him, he'd have a dream or he would see something in a painting and he'd be like, ooh, and he'd sketch something out. You think about the Angel of Death from Hellboy 2, where, again, it has no eyes. It has this weird headpiece, again, acted by Doug Jones. Doug Jones is that is Del Toro's guy.
That's his guy, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
But then its wings are covered in eyes. And you just go, yeah, what an evocative and strange imagery that's just terrifying for whatever reason, right?
I mean, that's what he's the master at, though, right? I mean, this movie and this scene in particular comes down to Doug Jones's performance, I think, but also just Del Toro's art direction. I mean, he's so good at creating these creatures, and I kind of forgot what a wonderful and haunting fantasy flick this is, and insanely violent, though it's not super violent in this scene, though it has the potential to, and it puts those creepy feels in your body, and Ophelia is not that observant, and you're like, hey, you're in this guy's den, you should maybe be looking over to see what he's doing. And
those paintings up on the wall of the beast like eating all these children, and you're like,
that's when you're like, oh, I shouldn't be here. That's when she kind of gets it. But there's this, he loads this table with all this decadent food that he can't even eat.
Yeah.
Right? It's just there. It's there to tempt you. It's such a fascinating creature because I love the idea, because you see the plate of eyes and it looks like it's sleeping, but it's not, because it just doesn't have eyes, right?
Yeah.
And then, but it also has a human form to a degree, so you get that relation to the creature and thinking like, whoa, what is she walking into here? They don't really explain it.
No.
You know, we're in a world where she can draw with this chalk and go to these different worlds through her floor or the walls or whatever it is she decides to do. And I love that Del Toro takes us there. But you're right, this is different, especially in 2006, than most horror movies, and he's truly a master at this. So
well, and it doing something different. I mean, I think all the way back, like I said, I think the ghost that I very first saw in Devil's Backbone was unlike any interpretation of a ghost I'd ever seen, where the blood is flowing upwards because the child is actually dead underwater, and so it's this
that's right
this dreamy sensibility. But then even to something like the vampires that we saw in Blade 2, where they have this mouth that opens as this huge maw, to all of that. I mean, if you do not believe that Guillermo del Toro is not horror movies version of Jim Henson, go watch the monster alley scene in Hellboy 2.
Oh yeah,
is incredible, with practical effects of all these beasts and these things that you've never even dreamt of.
That's the key right there. Practical, right?
Yes.
None of this is fake. Yeah, I mean, even look at him doing Pacific Rim. He created those big, huge robots, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, it looks real. It is real.
Yeah.
And he puts his spin on it because, you know, he has those deep, rich, vibrant colors and that painstaking detail.
And I'll throw out right here for anybody. And actually, I was mentioning Pepe Monzo in our last episode, and he and I were talking about this a couple days ago. But for anybody who got sold a false bill of goods and went and watched Crimson Peak, thinking it was going to be like a terrifying horror movie, and then was like, this is boring. Go watch it again, knowing that it's a gothic thriller, and you will love the movie, because holy shit, I loved it. I went and watched it again about 3 weeks ago. Loved it. It is so garish and overdone and brilliantly like melodramatic.
It is. I'm probably one of those who needs to see it again.
Holy God, dude. I disliked it the first time I saw it, and being like, I'm going to go back and watch it again and just like see if I can tell what he's doing. Loved it. And again, using practical effects, using sets, using all these different things. And here, I don't know if you know the story about where the Pale Man came from. Del Toro went to an aquarium as a little boy and was terrified by the manta ray. Because he's like, when it's floating towards you, you can see its whole face. But then it goes up like this, and its eyes are on its back, and all you can see are these two nostrils, and it's all
Oh, that's
white.
funny. I could totally see that.
Fish belly white with this big, weird, frowny mouth.
It's funny because he's obsessed with water, I think, and creatures in the water.
Of
I mean, you
course.
think of Pacific Rim or just the shape of
The
water.
shape of water, completely. Yeah.
And so he gets a lot of his creature creations from underworld type stuff, right?
Here's the second part that makes it even funnier. He was going through a crash diet when he made Pan's Labyrinth. And the other thing that happened is he lost a bunch of weight, and he had all this loose skin. And he was like, this is the grossest thing I've ever experienced. And so when he was doing the character design for the Pale Man, all that flabby, loose skin was things he was experiencing in his own life. And he was like, put it in. And he's like, because it was disgusting him. So he was like, this also is what it has.
He's one of those people and artists and directors that was just born to do what he does, right?
Yes.
Like I'm thinking of someone like Miyazaki who can just look out a window and create a whole world just by saying, "Oh, look at that," and that goes there, and or whatever. You know,
Totally.
he just instantly creates all this stuff. But he's such a curious character that he was made to make movies, and especially horror movies, because he lets things scare him, right?
Oh,
he allows himself to go there.
Which is why he sketches it all down, and he's like, this is doing something to me. And then realizes through his own empathy this is probably what it's doing to everybody else too, right? And he's right, because it does. When you first see that pale man with no eyes, it evokes something so deep within you, right?
For sure. Oh, completely. I mean, you don't know quite what you're looking at. And I think we also need to mention there's not really any dialogue in this scene other than her maybe saying something to the fairies for like a second with the key.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, it's pretty much dialogueless. But if you listen, and again, I know I always mention this when we do these, but the sound design here is amazing.
Incredible.
You get this,
There's no music.
Crackling
There's
of the,
no music either. Yeah.
No music, but you get this crackling of the fire. And then you kind of hear in the background these kids, babies' voices like playing like "Ring Around the Rosie." Not really that, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
like,
some kind of little
it's
kid
like
songs.
Some echo of some souls that are trapped in that room somewhere. maybe in the grapes or the food or something. And I don't know. It's such a unique thing. And you know, it took Doug Jones 5 hours to get into that costume and do all the makeup, which he's obviously, you know, he's an Andy Serkis type of performer.
Yeah,
right?
he loves it. This is his thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, do what you got to do to me. So, I love that. I love that the fairies warn her. You know, all the crackling and the breathing, and like, you know, she picks up that grape and you're like, and he starts moving and he gets up and he puts the eyes in his hands and does the thing where his eyes are in his hands, and you're just like, whoa, I really haven't seen that before.
Yeah, you've never seen that before. Once it opens up, and again, to go to Doug Jones, like, such performance of like, you know, the physicality of him as an actor is amazing.
That's the only scene he's in too, right?
No, he plays the fawn. Also,
that's right. Right. But I mean the Pale Man. I meant the Pale Man, not Doug Jones.
Yes, the Pale Man is in. Yes, but Doug Jones plays both roles, and actually,
that's right.
Del Toro also said in an interview, he was like, "Of course, I'm going to use Doug Jones to do both," and he's like, "But I also wanted there to be a hint that the duality between this ogre of the Pale Man and our maybe good guy, the fawn, like, we don't really know if he's a good guy or not, that it's possible that the fawn as a shapeshifter is playing all these other roles also, right? He's like, I wanted that to be definitely a breadcrumb that people could pick up on.
There's duality there for sure. I get that. And then again, you know, like I was saying earlier, she's not very observant. She takes the grape and he gets up and starts walking towards her, and she doesn't know until it's like a few feet. I'm like, you know, it's that classic horror movie.
Yeah, you're like, how do you
turn around, look?
How do you not turn around and see that Mitch McConnell is fucking creeping towards you? Like, how do you not see that?
Oh, that's good.
The Pale Man totally has Mitch McConnell mouth. I'm sorry, he does. It's the same mouth.
It's the jowls.
Yeah.
But it refreshed my love of Del Toro that not that I ever lost necessarily, but I hadn't thought about it in a little while because I hadn't seen Nightmare Alley yet, which is his most recent film.
I have not either.
Not
yet.
And then I wasn't a huge fan of Crimson Peak either. So
go back. That's all I'm going to say. Go back.
Okay,
go back.
I appreciate that, and I probably will. But I love when he can create a world where you can do things like they do in this film, which is just very unique, and especially for horror, where there's so much more expanse of the mind. You know, people want to make movies about reality and real social issues or whatever it is, but horror allows you to go to so many places and still talk about those things, right?
Totally. Well, and I think that one thing I thought a lot about when watching this scene again and thinking about Pan's Labyrinth is that, well, two things. One, I love that by the time he got to Pan's Labyrinth, Del Toro had really made a name for himself, and there were multiple studios lined up to give him whatever funding he wanted as long as the movie was in English, and he turned all of them down.
That's right.
I love him so much for that. That he's like, no, this movie takes place in Spain. This was the whole point of the movie. Like, why would it be in English? You guys are idiots.
And guess what? It did fine in the theaters.
It did fine.
I remember, yeah, and didn't it win some awards,
Yeah,
Academy Awards as well?
It never needed to make that kind of caveat. So that's first. But second, that I was thinking about it, and I was like, the idea of fantasy horror is such a small niche anyway. Like, it's
hard to pull off.
It's hard to pull off, and can you, other than Guillermo del Toro, can you think of another director who does it? Like, with fantasy horror.
I mean, I guess you could say, Peter Jackson and some of the Lord of the Rings stuff can mix in there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll give you that.
But again, all CGI as opposed to where here this is practical effects. I mean, not all of it's CGI. Obviously, like the orcs and stuff like that are real, and those are truly scary looking.
Yeah, sure.
Looking demons.
And I'll give you that. That's very close to that. But I'm just saying, like, it's such a small niche.
It's true. No, it's not. It's not easy to do, and not easy to do well, and still have a relevant point and theme to your movie, right? And he does some. There's definitely some shocking moments in this movie
that are not fantasy. There's some shocking moments.
There's some reality.
Shocking, violent moments. There is a Haneke, a Haneke level oh fuck moment in this movie that you do not see coming, that has nothing to do with magical frogs or fawns or anything, that I was like, whoa, Gilmore. Okay. Like, we already know he's a bad guy. I didn't need that.
It's not Haneke, because Haneke puts all that horror off the camera. Right?
I guess that's true.
It's the irreversible.
It totally is irreversible.
It's that part. It's that level of violence.
It really is. Yeah.
Amazing scene. So glad we revisited it. It made me, like I said, love Del Toro. Just a reminder of how unique and special he is, and I hope he continues to make movies, and I hope he's Clint Eastwood and just makes them until he's 90 years old.
Dude, 90-year-old Guillermo del Toro. I love it because it will be the most spellbinding, weird fantasy horror movies. Like, I love his vision. I just think
it's so down your alley.
It's what I would have wanted to make when I was like 12 and I was drawing monsters in all my notebooks. And
amazing scene. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, we're going to continue our Complicated Failures Festival with Lady Killers.
Oh my God, I can't wait to talk about it.
And hopefully in person when we do that.
Yeah, that's the plan. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe if you like what we do, and follow along with the festivals and everything else. And we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, you guys. Bye.